Welcome to Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM's POTUS.
Welcome to Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM for Thursday, December 19th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined by RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So House Speaker Mike Johnson got an early Christmas present from Donald Trump. It's not a very nice one. The Speaker...
I think you would have rather had coal in his stocking.
It was coal, yeah. He wound up on Trump's naughty list.
Yeah.
So the Speaker, he had this bill to fund the government for the next 3 months. It's essentially been killed now after Trump joined in efforts to end it. So two things, Tom. Does this mean we're on the path to a government shutdown? And what does this mean for the future of Speaker Johnson?
Well, those are both good questions. Yes, we are on the path to a shutdown. Friday at midnight is the deadline. And so these guys all want to get out of town, guys and gals want to get out of town and head home for Christmas. So they are...
And Hanukkah.
And Hanukkah, yes, of course. And Kwanzaa, I'm sure, as well. So there's urgency there. And that's one of the reasons they kind of, again, did what they always do, which is just, load up the Christmas tree and this omnibus spending package and shove it out the door, as they're getting on their planes. Not this time. And so we'll see whether they are able to pass something that will keep the government open, fund essential services, et cetera, and then maybe a couple of additional items, including, relief aid for hurricane victims and a couple of other items, instead of what they had done, which was, funded, just tons and tons and tons of different programs, everything from this Global Engagement Center, which has been sort of a nefarious operator on censorship and attacking, American-based companies, and other things that were the bridge in Baltimore, for example, is just one example. Does that money really need to be passed to keep the government open? No. And there's some other things like that, a lot of other things like that are extraneous that have been just sort of dumped on this bill. And so we'll see whether Congress is able to do that or not. But Mike Johnson, he was the one who put this thing together. And his pitch to Republicans was, hey, let's just do this thing. And then when Donald Trump gets in office, we can take another look at it in March. Well, that did seem to work. It was convincing to enough Republicans that he thought he had a deal done until Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk stepped in and ginned up a firestorm. And that was followed by Donald Trump and J.D. Vance releasing a statement saying, this is not going to stand. And so Johnson really hurt himself here. I think he really, really injured himself. And again, with such a precarious margin in the House, and this still with this motion to vacate only being, I think, any single member of Congress can file a motion to vacate. He's in real trouble now, I think. I think his future now is in question and in jeopardy, which it wasn't just, 24 hours ago.
Carl, you see it that way?
Well, we sometimes say that Donald Trump is his own campaign manager. And when people covered the White House, when Trump was there last time, remember he had a press secretary who, by the way, wouldn't talk to the press, wouldn't hold briefings, wouldn't give interviews, wouldn't do anything. So he was his own press secretary. And now he's gone, and the job keeps growing. Now it seems that Donald Trump also wants to be Speaker of the House. And if
he's not even president yet, by the way, just to remind people.
Yeah, exactly. President-elect Trump wants to also run the House.
Dictator on day one. Isn't that what he said?
Yeah, but this isn't. Yeah, as Andy points out, that we're not at day one yet. We'll talk later in the show about who actually is president now. But this is going to be tough for, I think, Mike Johnson to swallow. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance put out a statement, and it was pretty precise. And Andy, you said, Vivek Ramaswamy read this whole bill, 1,500 pages. I don't know anybody else who ever did or ever would. I said he was, during the primary season, a nerd. He proved it. But you know what? God bless him. He read this thing and found things in it. The couple of things that Tom mentioned, J.D. Vance and Donald Trump in their joint statement singled out, Liz Cheney. You can see how much she stuck in Trump's craw. It's the only name he mentioned. And they want to raise the debt ceiling now. They want Democrats to have to do it while Biden's president, and they want to slim down CR that keeps the government funded, and then they're going to revisit everything. And this money that Tom mentioned in the State Department, the censorship thing, well, that money's not pretty clearly not going to be in there in the new budget. So Mike Johnson may hang on, but you wonder how much authority is the job worth having now if Trump's going to basically be the guy who's calling all the shots.
Well, Trump was on Fox News this morning, Tom, and he said that Johnson could remain Speaker. He said Johnson could easily remain if he, quote, acts decisively and tough and eliminates, quote, all of the traps being set by the Democrats in the spending bill. But how realistic is that? And, to give, Speaker Johnson, we knew he had a tough job last time around. It hasn't gotten any easier. It won't get any easier. His majority is still very slender. But he's been fairly deft at surviving so far. I think he surprised a lot of people. Do you think maybe he can wiggle his way out of this one as well?
He might be able to, because I don't think there was, as I said, prior to the other day, there wasn't a ton of, resistance to him, I should say. But I heard a lot of Republicans really give him the third degree over this, that he authored this bill, that he put it together. This was his deal. And he put all this crap in there that, just 43 days ago, Republican voters and independents, by the way, and, strong plurality, if not majority of the American people voted against this exact kind of thing. And if Washington is truly going to change, it can't be business as usual. And that's what this was. And so,
yeah, but wait a minute, Tom, because the deadline's now. The new Congress is not here yet. Mike Johnson put this together because he had to get it through the Senate. It had to pass muster with Chuck Schumer. I don't know I don't know how he could have done it differently. We're sort of skipping a step here.
Right.
What did we think he was going to be able to do with the Democrats still running the Senate?
I mean, listen, I think stirred up a lot of the animosity that was already out there toward the way the Washington works and has worked for a long time. And again, Elon Musk, I mean, we were talking about this the other day, and I was when he put out a statement, I thought, oh boy, this is bad news for Republicans. And other people were like, no, this is gonna be fine. It's not gonna be an issue. And sure enough, within like a few hours, there were Republicans lining up to say this bill is dead. So clearly, that's where Republicans are and the Republican caucus is. And so Mike Johnson's going to have to figure out a way to, as you said, Carl, wriggle out of this and try and save his job and save some face and still, manage to deliver what Republican voters and the Republican base wants.
Right. Let me ask you something, though, Andy, because I'm looking ahead to the new Congress, which is sworn in before President-elect Trump is be sworn in. And their majority is so thin. If Chip Roy pulls some number like Matt Gaetz did last time, and a couple of Republicans missed their flights, these guys could wake up and have Hakeem Jeffries as their speaker.
We talked about that as being as a possibility, and there is at least one Republican representative who has said that she won't caucus with the Republicans. I mean, she'll remain a Republican. It won't affect their majority, but she doesn't want to be part of the caucus. And it does seem this time that Hakeem Jeffries has said he's not going to pull the speaker's, bacon out of the fire. They've said that this was, I think, the tweet, House Republicans have been ordered to shut down the government, hurt the working class of Americans they claim to support. You break the bipartisan agreement, you own the consequences that follow. So, tough words from Jeffries on that. But Tom, to that point, I mean, so we have a government shutdown. How bad is that for the Republicans at this point? Or have people sort of come to expect these shutdowns occasionally, and people will be like, well, you know what, if we have to shut down the government to get things right, it's a small price to pay. I can't go to the national parks, but maybe I'm not going over Christmas anyway.
I mean, it's impossible to predict how this will play itself out. I mean, in 2013, I think when Republicans engineered the shutdown, they were punished for it. But the last time that it happened, I think the administration actually was the one that sort of took the brunt. So we'll see what happens. I mean, going back to, Carl, and your question, like what did he expect? What could he have done? Well, it doesn't seem to me that Vivek Ramaswamy's sort of solution and that he offered, just pass something to keep the government open, but don't pass all this. Why do we have to have all this other stuff? He's like, the bill could be 20 pages long, right? That seems reasonable to me. And then you pass a couple other things. And
Tom, it seems reasonable to you. Did it seem reasonable to Chuck Schumer?
Yes, that's the question.
But then to the politics of this, Chuck Schumer's the one who's saying no. Chuck Schumer's the one who's saying, no, I want a government shutdown. Because it's not enough for me to keep the government functioning and get hurricane relief to people in West Virginia. I want, the bridge in Baltimore. I want all this other stuff. I want the Global Engagement Center. I want all these billions and billions and billions of dollars additionally. That's a fight that Republicans could win with the public, I think.
Tom, that's the second time you've mentioned that. Andy has to take that bridge when he goes to Baltimore. You don't want him to catch a flight this year? Come on, that bridge needs to be rebuilt.
I'm hopeful about
special pleading,
yes.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Right. Well, guys, you know what? We're going to have to take a break right there. Thank you for pitching in on the bridge effort there, Carl. I appreciate that. Everyone in Baltimore, well, thank you. You're listening to Real Clear Politics. We're going to be right back after this. Don't go away.
This is Real Clear Politics on POTUS, Sirius XM Channel 124.
Not bound by any left-right constructs.
Real Clear Politics. Open to a wide political spectrum.
This is POTUS on Sirius XM Channel 124.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Carl Cannon and Tom Bevan. And Carl, there is this Wall Street Journal article that ran today. The headline is How the White House Functioned with a Diminished Biden in Charge. It goes on to say aides kept meetings short, controlled access, top advisors acted as go-betweens, and public interactions became more scripted. The administration denied, Biden has declined. So, Carl, this was based on interviews with nearly 50 people. What do you make of the reporting, and what do you make of the story coming out now?
Well, I don't like to overuse the word scandal, but the more we find out about this, the Biden administration, the more it seems like a scandal to me. We have one president at a time, and I've made the point of Donald Trump's not president yet, but at Tom's point out, well, there's a vacuum. But these people who call Bill Clinton President Clinton, who called Trump President Clinton or President Trump all the time he was out of office, that's not our system. We don't have rival courts, but we kind of did, and it was Barack Obama, and he didn't leave Washington. There's a reason presidents leave Washington when they're done. It's so there'll be no confusion who's in charge. And this is compounded by Biden's top staff were people from the Obama administration. They were people loyal to Obama. And when you hear these stories, you think two things. First of all, who was really running the government? Was it really Barack Obama? And or was it Joe Biden, or was it these aides who were holdovers and aides, Democratic, professional people, competent people, good people, smart people, but not elected people. And then the second thing is that people who raise this, the Wall Street Journal had a piece like this earlier this year, and other people have done the reporting. They were shouted down, they were attacked. Jim Garotti of the National Review had wrote a column about this, and he was attacked. A CNN journalist wrote that to even raise this issue in 2021 after the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, and National Review raised the issue that maybe Biden's diminished state was part of the problem here. And here's what they said about it. They were called liars, conspiracy theorists, and this was a direct quote from a piece by another journalist in CNN, that people who raised this issue were purveyors of the gross, lowest common denominator politics that drive people away from public life. In other words, attacked and sort of told to shut up. And now to find out that this is true, it seems to me people have something to answer for here. And including these people the first lady and these aides? Is this really Joe Biden's state? And if so, why did they go along with it? And why did they attack people who questioned it? And why did they lie?
Yeah. Tom, one thing that struck me about the article was that this seemed to start early in the administration. They say within the first few months, they were making adjustments to his schedule, all this to sort of to take into account the fact that he had diminished capability right from the beginning. It wasn't something that sort of declined over a couple of years. That this was sort of from day one, or pretty much from day one, was the way the White House was running.
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of striking. I mean, look, this is on one level, this is a very sort of a duh story. Like everybody already knew this, right? We already knew this. And to Carl's point, anybody who said it in real time was shouted down and called, a partisan hack or whatever. When it was clearly true that Biden, was diminished somewhat. And I think it accelerated throughout his presidency. So Annie Linsky, who wrote the piece along with her colleagues, was on CNN this morning, and there was an interesting exchange. Kate Bedingfield, who left the White House in March of 2023, was disputing, I shouldn't say disputing, but saying basically during her time in the White House, she was in the Situation Room with Biden, and that he was, tough and lucid and, making tough decisions and all of those things. He didn't have the sort of communication capabilities to continue to run for president, but that he still had the capability to take in information from aides and advisors and make tough decisions. And it even says in the article, this is one of those things. And anybody who has had a family member who has gone through, the aging process knows there are good days and there are bad days. And I'm sure, Biden, he had some days, and they said in the article, there were some days where he had bad days where they canceled all of his meetings and had to push things around just because he was having a bad day. That's not exactly what you want. Even that in and of itself, I think is newsworthy and noteworthy, but the press was not interested in that story. They did not report it. I mean, that's the one thing. There are two things about this story that struck me. One is, okay, well, now that the election's over and Biden's on his way out the office, we're getting, the public is going to be allowed to hear from reporters. Not just this Wall Street Journal piece. There was a piece in the New York Times earlier this week, Peter Baker, a weary Biden, on his way out the door, something like that, talking about his age. And the other thing, to Carl's point, I mean, I read this whole article and I thought to myself the whole time, all I could think was, what the hell was Jill Biden doing? Because she's the one who was with him at night, in the morning, all the time. She knew. She's
Edith Wilson,
more than anyone else, even his closest aides. She knew what his status was as far as his capacity, and she not only, I think, hid it from people, but she pushed him to run again. I mean, she was one of the driving factors, and I think we'll find out probably in the future that she was the one who was actually doing a lot of the decision making and running of the government, because she was closest to him, his closest advisor, all of that. But she was the one who pushed him to run again, and that's just unconscionable. I mean, it was just it's really does not, in my opinion, it just reflects really poorly on her.
Can I jump in here?
Sure.
Andy, Tom said something about the media's role in this, and I thought of it a little differently. I think I've covered the White House for 15 years. It's hard to get behind. It's hard to get behind the scenes to that level. You're talking about pretty intimate access there. But it made me think, you have these people like Kate Bedingfield and Jen Psaki who worked in administration, and then suddenly they're members of the press. They're on these panels. They're hosting shows. It shows you why that system is ultimately not good. It so easily lends itself to corruption. You're depending, when you hire one of those people, on the president sort of doing good, not making mistakes.
You mean like someone like George Stephanopoulos?
Yeah.
I think we're going to get to him in a minute. I don't
we're going to talk about
Andy likes to be the ringmaster here, so I don't want. I know. I avoided saying Stephanopoulos' name, but
Just trying to move the program along here.
okay, all right.
Segue.
All right.
Before we get there, though, since
Yes,
you did mention Jill Biden, this is the headline in the Daily Mail today. It's a British tabloid. It says, how vengeful Jill Biden is urging depressed Joe to burn the whole thing down in their final days, with Obama, Kamala, and Pelosi at the top of her, quote, naughty list. Carl, pretty good British tabloid headline there, but how accurate do you think that is?
Well, I've heard that Michelle Obama and Jill Biden are no longer on speaking terms. I think the assumption here is that Jill Biden blames Pelosi and the Obamas for shoving Joe out. But, at some level, she has to be relieved. What Tom was saying, she's seen this. She may have pushed him to run, but he wasn't going to be able to make it another 4 years. And she knows that better than anyone. My guess is that the Obamas are, mad at her because for the reason that Tom said. You have to remember this. Our listeners and viewership too. When Barack Obama picked Biden as his running mate in 2008, he told him, Joe, you understand this is as far as you get now. You'll be too old. And Biden agreed. And he didn't live up to his agreement. And so, you're going to say who Jill Biden's mad at them. They ought to be mad at her.
Yeah. Tom, last word.
Well, they are mad at her, and that's part of the problem that the Democrats have. I mean, there was a part of that article was that, when Barack Obama, he didn't endorse Kamala right away, and Nancy Pelosi wanted, I think, there to be an open process, and the theory is that Joe and Jill basically said, no, we're not doing that. You're stuck with Kamala, even though they didn't want Kamala to be the nominee. They wanted, maybe Gavin Newsom or somebody else to emerge through the process. But look, the Daily Mail piece, I mean, it's not quite the level of the Wall Street Journal talking to 50 people. They may have talked to a couple people to get to their point. But it doesn't surprise me. I think the truth, it might be exaggerated, but I think the truth is there is bad blood. Everybody's disappointed. The Bidens were disappointed on how they were treated and how Joe was sort of summarily dismissed. And other members of the Democratic Party are upset that Joe Biden ran in the first place. And if he had just honored his pledge to be his transitional figure, serve 4 years, save the country from Donald Trump, yada, yada, and move on, that, they would have been in a much better position and might have even won that election. So I think all of that's true. Whether she's advising him to actually, quote, burn the place down on his way out the door might be a little overwrought, but certainly there are some bruised feelings all around on the Democratic side right now.
Yeah, well, there's some good reporting in there, too, about Christmas parties at the White House and around Washington for the Democrats. It's a good read. It's definitely worth it, and it's on our front page. Hey, you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevin and Carl Cannon. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about George Stephanopoulos and some other stuff as well. So don't go away. We'll be back after this.
This is Real Clear Politics with Andrew Walworth on Sirius XM. Real Clear Politics, a neutral, even-handed arbiter of political data. You're listening to POTUS, Sirius XM Channel 124.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm here with Tom Bevin and Carl Cannon. And as we talked about in the last segment, ABC News actually renewed the contract for George Stephanopoulos, despite the company's decision to settle President-elect Trump's defamation suit against ABC News. He was making about $18 million a year, Carl. There's some reporting that he is taking a significant cut in pay, but he's back. What do you make of them keeping Mr. Stephanopoulos around?
Well, I covered George when he was a young aide and he worked for Bill Clinton and always liked him and always got along with him. But I think these salaries that these people are paid in television warp the system. I think they're obscene. If you're an anchorman and you're making $20 million a year, what is that? That's I'll do the math quickly in my head. 1.66 million a month. All right, you live in New York, so you pay half your taxes. That's $800,000 a month take home pay. That's going to put you, by definition, out of touch with with your audience, with working Americans. It's going to tempt you to do things that you shouldn't do and say things you shouldn't say to keep your ratings up, to keep your bosses happy. It's almost disqualifying in terms of making that kind of money and still thinking of yourself as a journalist. I know I'm old school there, but that's the big problem here to me. In terms of keeping Stephanopoulos after he libeled President Trump, I don't know. You would think Donald Trump.
Speechless, Carl.
Yeah,
Carl's speechless. This rarely happens.
You'd think Donald.
I'm
Trump
not speechless. Can I jump in?
Yeah, please do. I was going to say, I think you think Trump would be libel proof, but apparently not. But go ahead, Tom.
Well, Andy, I don't know where you read. I mean, I read the LA Times story this morning. They said he was getting paid $20 million. They renewed him on a multi-year deal, around $20 million a year. So I have not heard the news. What was interesting though is there was reporting last night that they might be parting ways, that he was going to get fired or let go. And then the news came out this morning that no, they've re-signed him to a multi-year deal, and he's going to be making, around $20 million a year, which is to Carl's point. I mean, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. I mean, it's not quite as much as Rachel Maddow's making for working like one day a week. I think she signed a $25 million a year deal, which is also absurd. Look, especially when, I think to Carl's point, if you were in any other business, if you were responsible for, you were negligent in your job and cost your organization $15 million via a lawsuit, you probably wouldn't be rewarded with a new multi-year fantastic deal. You'd probably get fired, or you'd get, suspended, or something bad would happen to you. It's not what happened to George Stephanopoulos. And so I don't know why that is. And there's some speculation about what he might have on people or this or that. But you can't say it's because he's been doing a good job, because, the ratings.
Well, wait a minute. How are the ratings doing?
The ratings are good. I mean, they were down a little bit, but it's still the number one show, morning show.
You're talking about GMA?
Yeah. GMA is still the number one show. So let me.
Here's a TV
let me
guy.
disagree
He's
with
going to
both
weigh
of you.
in. He's going to defend these obscene salaries in this grotesque industry. Go ahead, Andy. You have the floor.
Okay. This is the defense. These people, there's a market. It's like market for CEOs, or market for baseball players or football players or movie stars or rappers or anybody else.
Are you saying George Stephanopoulos is the Juan Soto of television?
He's not. At that salary, he's sort of mid-range, I think, for anchors. I mean, it's not
really.
Yeah, for the morning shows. The morning shows are huge money makers.
What justifies that, Andy? It's crazy.
What justifies is the market. That's like, you can say that about anybody's salary.
It's inside. Yeah, man, it's insider dealing. You telling me they couldn't get somebody for $8 million a year?
Carl's doing his Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren deal here.
Right.
We certainly am. Damn right. These guys will make a socialist out of me. Believe me.
These anchors, they work very hard, long hours.
Oh, come on.
And they have a lot of responsibility. They've got morals clauses that they have to live up to. It's
Andy, please.
What would McLaughlin say to this?
Megyn Kelly is going to light you up when she listens to this.
I hope she's listening.
We're going to be on her show next week.
He's going to back in her doghouse, isn't he? Yeah.
No, I will defend the free market, and I think people get paid what they get paid, and good for George Stephanopoulos for being able to renegotiate his contract.
The last of the laissez-faire capitalists.
Bob Iger and Disney out of $20 million of their own money.
Well, I will say that all the three of us earn every dime we get paid for.
That's right. We are the hardest working people in show business on an hourly wage.
But let's talk about some other people who work pretty hard, and those are the workers at Amazon. This is a busy time of year for them, but they're striking at facilities across the country. It's what the Teamsters Union calls the largest strike against the online shopping giant. It's all happening now, just a week before Christmas. Tom, I think you might be affected because the facilities include New York City, Atlanta, 3 locations in Southern California, 1 in San Francisco, and 1 in Skokie, Illinois. So what do those all have in common, and how affected will you be?
Well, with the exception of Atlanta, all of them are in blue states and very blue sort of metros. I mean, I guess you could say Atlanta's a blue metro, but certainly Georgia's not a blue state. At least it wasn't just a month and a half ago. But yeah, I mean, this is, it's a week before Christmas, 5 days before Christmas, whatever we are. It's a point of maximum leverage. I did one of the facilities right down, it's like a couple miles from my house. So I guess I won't be getting my packages on time for Christmas. I'm going to have to figure out some alternate plans here at the last minute.
I sent you a new putter. Gosh.
I was going to say, this gives you an excuse. It gets you off the hook.
Yeah, no. Look, the Teamsters statement said, you can blame the insatiable greed of the company for their obscene profits and, all but they did not use Jeff Bezos' name, but all but, called him out by name and the company. And so these are the facilities that we'll see, how Amazon responds to this and if it does really affect their business and their customers' business. But it's certainly, look, unions have been, and I'm also interested to hear how Republicans and Donald Trump responds. I mean, Trump has taken the side of unions repeatedly during the campaign and in other times. Joe Biden tried to portray himself as the biggest, most union president ever, walked a picket line with the Teamsters and Sean O'Brien, who's headlining this strike as well. So it'll be interesting to see how Trump responds to this development.
I think it'll also be interesting how Jeff Bezos responds. To me, this is not going to make him think more of his shop should be unionized. This is going to strike him as acting in bad faith to strike a week before Christmas, and he's going to, and if he capitulates to the strike, the union leadership say, see what we did for you, and it'll give them leverage to unionize all these other sites around the country. I think this could actually be a pretty tough labor war.
You think so?
And the union.
Or do they cave quickly because it is the holiday and they can't?
That's what I'm saying, though. If he caves quickly, that's
no. I'm not Amazon. I mean that the union says, okay, well, we don't want to disrupt everyone's Christmas, so
it's not what they sounded like.
Yeah, no, you're right. They don't sound. They sound pretty much like they want to close down Christmas for people. But we'll see how the public reacts. But
closing down Christmas and closing down the government. What?
Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
Two cheers for close downs. Right. But Tom, Carl raises an interesting point, which is that Trump is pretty much more pro-labor, you'd say, and given his appointment so far, sort of more pro-labor than Republicans in the past. Do you think, does he have a sort of a different position here than other Republican presidents have had?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the areas where I think he's moved the party, and it's been, he's moved the party on a lot of issues: foreign policy, trade, and I think labor is one of them. I mean, he's changed the party to a working class party, so I think he has to be, he is. By nature, sort of more in tune and sensitive to working people. And there are a lot of union members. Look, there are a lot of union households that voted for him, and a lot of, obviously non-union households as well. But I think he is a little bit attuned to that. I mean, previous Republicans, all the way back to Ronald Reagan, just be like, fire them, get rid of them, bring in the scabs, let's go. I don't think Trump. It would shock me if that's how Trump approached this one.
I'll make a quick observation about that. Trump his antipathies for public employee unions and teachers unions. I think private unions, he's worked with them in the past. Andy,
his whole business is built around unionized.
Well, we had an event in 2017 that I moderated the conversation. We had the head of the laborers union was the keynote speaker. I did a Q&A with him. And he was not very anti-Trump. He said, I know Trump. He said he was based in San Francisco. And he said, I've worked with him. I said, you sound like you can work with him. He said, I have worked with him. He said, not all of his projects are union, but a lot of them are. And we've worked with him, and we found him to be somebody we could do business with, to Tom's point.
Yeah. Well, we're going to keep an eye on that strike out there. And Tom, I hope your Christmas presents arrive in time.
You and everybody else.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. We've been talking. It's Tom Bevan, Carl Cannon. We'll be back in just a minute. And when we do, I'm going to talk to Tom Shanker about drones. He's got some interesting things to tell us. Don't go away.
This is Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. Covering the news fairly and honestly.
You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM's POTUS, Channel 124.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and our next guest is Tom Shanker. He is a longtime Pentagon correspondent and editor at the New York Times, and he's the co-author of the book Age of Danger, Keeping America Safe in an Era of New Superpowers, New Weapons, and New Threats. So, Tom, welcome to the program.
Andy, it's always an honor to join you. Thank you.
So I want to talk to you today because you were one of the first people I know who really focused on the military utility of drone technology. And in your book, you have a whole chapter on how drones will change the battlefield. But let's start here at home. We've got these drones. People have been seeing them over New Jersey and other states, including now Texas. And what I'm wondering is, even if these drones are not dangerous, have we learned anything about our own vulnerabilities to this sort of threat because of this experience?
Yeah, it's a great question, Andy, and thank you for that. You know, the FAA, I checked the stats before I came on with you. The FAA has registered 1 million drones in the United States. And those are just the people who bother to register. So if you do the math, they're going to be in the sky just about everywhere all the time. And what we're learning now is the ubiquitousness of these drones. And, you know, it doesn't appear that all the recent sightings, that any of them come from foreign intelligence services. They're not outer space aliens coming to invade us. They're just people putting drones up in the air. And there is kind of this cycle where once the drone sightings are reported, people start looking up. And now they're seeing small planes, commercial aviation. One person even reported to the FAA turned out to be Venus or Jupiter, right? So, you know, what we are entering an era where drones are going to be in the skies like taxis on the streets of big cities.
Right. Let's talk about the military aspect of this, though, in this regard. I mean, the fact that the government has assured us that these drones are not threatening and that sort of stuff, but they haven't really given us a real explanation for any of it. But is there a scenario where drones could be a threat, and is that worth taking seriously? And I'm not talking about the battlefield. I'm talking just sort of domestic terrorism, I guess.
Right. That's what my co-author Andy Hone and I really look at, which is the rise of the drones as a threat here on U.S. territory. We've already seen it. You know, there was about, 5-6 years ago, some drunk who lived near the White House was flying his gyrocopter, and he lost, line of sight control behind a building. Thing landed on the White House lawn. It wasn't intercepted, as it wasn't shot. And that was just a real nightmare for the Secret Service. Baseball games have been halted for drones. So thus far, it's only been hobbyists and chuckleheads. But it's easy to imagine a scenario in which a terrorist, domestic or foreign, disrupts a Super Bowl, a World Series, or even just a state fair by flying a drone over. Think about the emotional impact if a drone passed over a college football game and just dropped baking soda, right? Mm-hmm. Not even anthrax. Think about the terror that would be caused, and then think through if it really was a malign actor. And that's just on the civilian side. There have been sightings of drones over military bases. And the problem is the technology, the tracking's not in place to defend us thoroughly.
Yeah. You and I went to school together 100 years ago. We went to a little place called the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, where we studied defense strategy and a bunch of other stuff. But, so I'm always interested in talking to you about strategy. And it seems to me, and you've written about this, the drones, one of the things that drones do in the battlefield is it changes the cost balance of offense and defense. That is, what you want is always for the other side to have to use expensive weapons to counter your inexpensive targets. That's sort of, the economics of war, if you will. And in the case of drones, what you want is to force the opposition to use high-cost missiles, for example, to shoot down cheap drones. Where are we on, as far as being on the right side of that cost benefit, when you look at the United States military right now? Are we on the right side of that or on the wrong side of that push me, pull you kind of equation.
Right. You phrased the question perfectly, Andy. We're on the right side when it comes to stated strategy. All the armed services are moving toward uncrewed, which is what they call them now, aerial systems to save lives. They're cheaper. They're very effective. The problem is a strategy without a budget is a fantasy. And the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Kathleen Hicks, has put her name on a program called Replicator, which is to field drones as a deterrence to China. Just as you said, China has more missiles, more jets, and could really deny U.S. and allied access to the waters around Taiwan because the U.S. can't lose its big, expensive ships. Problem is, at this point, Andy, the Replicator program is envisioning about 10,000 drones. That's how many drones Ukraine loses every month in its war with Russia.
Wow. So in Ukraine, 10,000 drones are being lost every month, and the entire U.S. budget for defending Taiwan is to have 10,000 drones. That's a day's worth of drones. And oh my gosh.
Yeah. So the ones the U.S. is envisioning are, as always, bigger, more complicated, better ISR and all that. So each one of those 10,000 would have higher capability, but it just shows you if we really want to deter a Chinese invasion of Taiwan by putting too many targets in the sky for them to hit, we're probably going to have to put a lot more money into it. But the core of your question is there is traditional resistance. I mean, the Air Force likes its white scarf pilots, right? And the Navy likes its big aircraft carriers. The Army likes its big vehicles. So all the services are putting some money into the drone effort, some brain calories, but to my mind, and I think yours, not enough, because drones, as we've seen in the Ukraine-Russian war, drones are the future of warfare.
Yeah, and that's interesting because all of this is always evolving. And so we think of drones now as, and rightly, as being sort of the future of warfare, I think. But what is the counter-drone technology? What is the defense that sort of move that sort of negates or changes the equation one more time? Is there anything on the horizon we should be looking at?
Right. If you unpack the Pentagon, the budget, there are all these very spooky programs. They sound like they've been culled from Marvel comic books. They're called Anvil and Shield and Thor, and some of them are kinetic. It's a bullet against a bullet. You shoot down the drone. A lot of them are electronic warfare. You scramble the guidance system. Some are microwave. You actually fry the internal pieces of that drone. So on the battlefield, you can do that. But the problem here at home, Andy, if you're DHS or a local police department, or even somebody protecting the inauguration, you start using some of these weapons, you're going to jeopardize commercial flight coming in to National Airport or Dulles. So the problem here at home, in a battlefield, the opposing parties own the space where they are. They can throw all kinds of horrible things up. Here at home, the authorities are not clear. If there's a drone going over the National Mall, let alone the White House, who has the authority to track it? Who has the authority to shoot it down? And what weapons will they use? And that's here in Washington. I can't imagine the authorities being at all in place in my native Oklahoma City, for example.
Right, yeah. Hey, you're listening to RealClearPolitics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm talking to Tom Shanker. He's a defense expert. We have him on every now and then to peer into the future a little bit, as well as tell us what's going on. Let's talk about Ukraine then for a second, and drone technology in Ukraine. What are the sort of the major lessons from the Ukraine war when it comes to drone technology?
Sure. As we recall, when Putin invaded 2+ years ago, he thought he'd be in Kyiv in the first week. The Ukrainians are a spirited, inspired, patriotic people, and they have a lot of advanced technology. They were putting cheap drones in the sky that were following the Russian tank columns, which were lined up in great Soviet fashion, marching in a row. And these very cheap drones were halting Russian armored columns, costing millions of dollars. Well, the Russians are not foolish. They have great technology. So now it really is a drone and counter-drone warfare. And Russia is sending drones not only to spot Ukrainian positions, but also to hit civilian infrastructure, power plants, sadly, hospitals and schools. So drones on both sides now are a cheap way to carry out a very effective war.
And I guess I just read this, that the Russians now have accused the Ukrainians of using drones to fly over and to drop phosphorus, which would be a violation of chemical weapons ban. Any truth to that rumor? And we got about a minute here. I mean, what is the sort of nightmare scenario with the drone? Is it that it's that drones can be used to sort of deliver weapons of mass destruction?
Right. The nightmare scenario, and I don't want to say it publicly, but it's already out there, would be a nefarious actor loading a hobby drone with phosphorus or anthrax or something like that, flying over a college or pro football event that isn't like the Super Bowl has all kinds of protection, the World Series, but just a regular football game and dropping a poisonous powder over an American public site. That is my nightmare situation, Andy. And as of right now, the authorities and the tools are not in place to stop it.
Wow. Well, Tom, we're going to have to leave it there. I've been talking to Tom Shanker. I'm Andrew Walworth. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM, and that's our program for today. We'll be back tomorrow. Hope to see you then. Have a good evening.
The
Politics
of
the
United
States. This is POTUS on Sirius XM Channel 124.